learning objectives, we have, we're going to talk about how to send persisted managed object data to server via a put request, how to sync local modifications with the server, and sync local deletions with the server. Okay, so those are going to be our takeaways. Again, how to make a put request to actually put things on the server, sync local modifications with the server, and deletions with the server through a delete request. Okay, so let me give you a quick sample of what sort of our finished project is going to look like tonight. Drag this over here, and we don't really see how it's actually doing or what it's doing until I have the server up.
I don't think it's sharing again, Johnny.
Oh man, yes, share screen right there. Okay, let me get the, where is it? Let's see here. Okay, so we are going to be working with a Firebase database today. Okay, and so the idea behind this is, go ahead and delete this, is that I can go ahead and hit this plus button. You can do test syncing server, you get a high priority. Here are some notes, and hit save. Okay, and am I on the right database? Where? Hold on. I think I am missing something. I probably just have weird versions up. Task controller. Make sure I have the right URL. Oh, yep, I don't have the right URL. That's why. Let me update that really quick. And okay, all right. Yes, I had the wrong URL up. Okay, so you see that when I launched the app, that a new task synced in. And that is a task that we have matching here. So if we look on our database, we see that I've got this task. It's got this identifier here. This completed is set to false. Test completion 2, notes none, and then priority is equal to normal. Okay, so if I finish a task, and I go ahead and mark it, you can see that it updates my database in real time. Okay, if I uncheck the task, similarly, it's going to set complete equal to false. Okay, if I want to delete a task, it removes that entire entry from my database. Okay, so that's the goal for tonight, is being able to sort of have our core data, all of the objects that we have inside of core data sort of sync up to our Firebase database. So that if I open this on an iPad, I would get all of the new stuff. So we're going to use the same base URL tonight. And so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that will work okay. We just all have to make sure that we actually send up the right kind of requests. Otherwise, we're going to mess up the database and I'll have to like manually edit it. But we're going to sort of be all on the same database. And so any tasks that we add are going to show up on each other's devices and whatnot for tonight. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead then. And we know that in order to be able to send up JSON data, our objects need to conform to what protocol? If I want to be able to encode and decode my objects,
Codable?
Need to conform to our codable protocol. So if I hop over to, well, first off, my tasks XC data model is generated for me, okay? And so I can't do anything about conforming to Codable here, but maybe if we go to my tasks plus convenience here, and we've got my extension on task, if I try to conform to Codable here, okay, we'll get an error, okay? And it says implementation of decodable cannot be automatically synthesized in an extension in a different file to the type, okay? So implementation of codable, exact same thing. Okay, so we can't actually write in the extension, we can't conform to the codable protocol. So what we have to do tonight is we have to create what's called a task representation, okay, which is sort of going to be a mirror image of our task object. We're going to take out all of the stuff about like managed object context and whatnot, right? Because the server doesn't care anything about any sort of managed object context. And it's not really, you can't really encode and decode a context. So we're going to create a task representation that's sort of a mirror of our task object, but minus all of the nasty core data stuff that we don't need on our server, okay? So let's go ahead then and let's create a new Swift file inside of our model folder. Okay, so I'm going to click on my model folder. We're going to do new file here. This is going to be a Swift file. Hit next here. And let's go ahead and call this task representation. Okay, task representation.swift. And then we'll go ahead and hit create. Okay, and then in your task plus convenience, you can just get rid of that codable because that's not actually going to work. Okay. Let me bring this back here. Oh, let's see. This back. Okay, so inside of our task representation, we're just going to create a new struct here. Okay, struct task representation. Okay, and our task representation object is what's going to actually conform to codable. Okay, so it's a representation of our task object, but we're just going to give it the bare bones minimum of what we need in order to properly sync with our server. Okay, so we've got our identifier, which is of type string. We've got a name of type string. Okay, we've got notes of type string optional, right? Because our notes are optional. We've got our priority, which is going to be of type string. I realize that it's of type task priority, but remember that the raw type of that enumeration is a string, okay? And then we've got whether it's complete or not, okay? And we'll make that optional. Okay. Okay, so this is pretty much the same if we look at our task object, right? We've got an identifier, name, notes, complete, and then our priority, okay? But we're sort of getting rid of all of this context stuff that we don't actually need. So it's just a simple representation of our task object. Okay, so let me go back here. And actually, I don't think complete needs to be optional. Okay, I'm trying to remember. Let's see if I look inside my data model. Complete. Yeah, is not optional. So. Okay. So what we need now is we need an easy way to sort of convert a task object into a task representation object. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's do that in our task plus convenience file here. And inside of my extension for task, we'll just do this before the convenience initializer. Let's create a computed property for a task representation. Okay, var task representation, so that every task object will have a task representation property on it that we can compute, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's say guard let name equals self.name, okay, and then let priority equal priority. Otherwise, we'll return nil, that we don't have a task representation object, okay? And then we'll go ahead and we'll return task representation. Okay, and then we're gonna access that initializer of our task representation. And let's go ahead and just pass in our properties on self. Okay, so we've got identifier, we've got name, and we've got our notes, we've got our priority, and then we have our complete here. Oh, sorry. The identifier in my task representation, the identifier we have is a string, but the identifier on task itself is of type UUID. Okay, so in order to get the string value of a UUID, we can access it through UUID string. Okay, but because that's optional, we'll go ahead and we'll give it a default value of an empty string. Okay, it'd be kind of weird if we couldn't gather the UUID string from the identifier, but we do have to sort of nil coalesce it there in order to get the compiler to be okay with it. So. Okay, so any questions about how we sort of get the task representation object out of our task?
Yeah, why are we only concerned about name and priority? Why not the other stuff?
Because name and priority are the only ones that are non-optional properties, so we can't properly create a task object unless we have those. Yeah, for some reason we don't have a name and a priority, then we want to deal, we're just going to say we don't have a task. Okay, so we found a way to be able to sort of convert from task to task representation. Okay, so a task that already exists, getting the task representation value out of it. But then we want to be able to do the reverse, where we turn a task representation into an actual task that can be saved into core data. Okay, so we're going to create a new initializer, a new convenience initializer. So let's just do this here after our other initializer. Okay, we're going to do @discardable result convenience init. Okay, convenience init. And this is an optional initializer. Okay, and we're going to do task. It's going to take in a task representation of type task representation. It's going to have a context of type NS managed object context. And we're going to give that a default value of core data stack dot shared dot main context. Okay, so in this initializer, if we have a task representation, we want to create a task with it. So let's check and say, okay, guard let priority remember the priority is going to come through as a string. So I want to make sure that I turn that priority into a task priority from our enumeration, right? So we're going to say guardlet priority equal task priority raw value task representation dot priority. Okay. And then let's also make sure that it has an identifier. Okay. It's equal to UUID. Because that is coming in as a UUID string, okay, we're going to try to create a UUID from a UUID string coming from the task representations identifier. Otherwise, we're going to return nil. So if for some reason we can't turn the priority into a task priority and we can't turn the identifier into a proper UUID, then we just want to return nil. We can't create a task object. Okay, and now that I have those, I can simply call self.init. We can let's see, self.init. Okay. I guess my autocomplete's not going to work. We're going to initialize with our identifier, passing in our identifier, with our name, passing in our task representation.name, our notes, passing in our task representation.notes, our priority, passing in our priority that we unwrapped up above, our complete, taking in task representation.complete, and our context. Going to be with our context here. Let's see. Do that in the wrong order. Sorry, I guess complete needs to come before priority. Because that's how I have it in the initializer up above. Okay, so again, what we've done thus far is we've added an initializer to convert representation into task, okay? So given a task representation from the server, say I open up my iPad, I get a task representation from the database. I want to be able to turn that into a task object, okay? So that's what this initializer is set up to do, okay? And similarly, if I want to take a task and get its task representation, I have this computed property to get task to get representation of a task.
Can you go down for a second?
Yes. Okay, any questions about either of those implementations? All right, you guys ready to start doing the networking stuff? We're all good there? Task representation, task, back and forth. Okay, cool. So next up, let's go ahead and let's create a task controller. Okay, so we don't have a folder here for model controllers. So I'm gonna right click on my tasks folder and I'm gonna do a new group and I'm gonna call this model controllers. I'll put this after model here. Okay, and inside of my model controllers folder, I'm going to do a new file. It's going to be a Swift file because the model controller doesn't inherit from anything, right? And we're going to do task controller.swift and hit create here. Okay, so we're going to get started here by creating a new class called our task controller. Okay, and to get started, I'm just going to make a quick helper method. Okay, it's going to be a private func here called save to persistent store. We're going to say that this throws. Okay, and then I'm going to say let MOC equal core data stack dot shared dot main context, and then we're going to try MOC dot save. Okay, just so that I don't need to continually call these lines throughout, I can just simply call save to persistent store and it will save on the context. So yeah, we'll need this in a second. Okay, now in order to help me with my error handling, I'm going to create, well, first off, I'm going to import core data here. Okay, but I do want to create an enumeration that's going to handle all of my network errors. Okay, and we're going to have 6 different cases here. Okay, so we're going to say case no identifier, case other error, case no data, case no decode, so there's an issue decoding, case no encode, so we had an issue encoding a task encoding our task representation object. Okay, and then we'll have a case no rep, which is just for like no task representation. Because remember, our task representation computed property can return nil if for some reason we can't generate a task representation from it. So I'm gonna log that as an error if that is ever the case. All right, so let's focus on getting our data up to the server first, and then we'll talk about how to get it down and how to update and everything. But for now, let's just focus on how to actually put a request onto our database, okay? So we want to get started with our base URL. So I'm going to send you this base URL here. Let's see. Okay. So go ahead and copy and paste that base URL. We can just put it outside of our task controller, be outside or inside. So this is going to be our base URL that we're going to be working with. Okay. For convenience, inside of my task controller, I'm going to type alias our completion handler. Okay, so I'm going to do a type alias, and we're going to call it completion handler. Okay, and the type expression is going to be our result type bool network error, returning void. Okay, so just like we give anything a return type, right? Or we give our closure a return type. I'm just type aliasing that so that I don't have to type this a million times. Okay, so we're just going to call that completion handler. And every completion handler that I call is just an alias for this result closure here.
So it's kind of just like setting a variable,
Mm-hmm.
not a variable, but a constant. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. That way, when I say like completion of type, I can just say completion handler instead of doing result, bool, network error, blah, blah, blah. So it's just an alias for this exact closure type. All right. So send task representation to Firebase. That's what we're going to do here. Okay. So let's go ahead and we're going to call this function send task to server. Okay. Send task to server. It's going to take in a task object. Okay. And then it's going to have a completion. We'll say at escaping. And then we're going to do completion handler. Okay, and then let's give that a default value of just an empty completion. Okay, so in here, we don't want to send anything to the database if we don't have an identifier. Otherwise, our database is not going to have a way to sort of differentiate it. So let's go ahead and make sure that our task has a UUID. Okay, so we're going to say guard let UUID equal task.identifier. Otherwise, okay, if it doesn't, then we're going to call our completion with a failure. Okay, and we're going to do our no identifier, network error, and return. Okay. So let's create our request URL. So let request URL equal our base URL dot appending path component. Okay. And we're going to put this request by the UUID string, or with the UUID string. Okay, so it's going to be our base URL with that appending path component. And then we're going to add an appending path extension, JSON. Okay, so we're building our request URL that's using our unique identifier for that task object, and then our appending path extension, JSON.
Is that appending path extension the same as setting the content type in the HTTP body?
So, yeah, it's similar to that.
But it's not a replacement, or?
In our case today, yes, we're gonna use it as a replacement for that.
Okay. Is it just like a Firebase thing then?
You know, I'm not 100% sure. It might be related to just how Firebase wants you to put things up.
Oh, okay. No worries. You don't have to try to find the answer. It's all good.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I feel like I don't have any like written documentation here for it, so I'd have to find out later for you. Okay, so we've got our request URL. So let's create a URL request. So we're going to say var request equals URL request, taking in our request URL. We're going to set the request type. Okay, HTTP method is going to be equal to PUT. Put method here. Okay. And then we want to encode it and put it in as the HTTP body for the requests. So let's go ahead and we're going to do that in a do try catch block here. Okay, so inside of this do here, let's go ahead and say guard let representation equal task dot task representation. Otherwise, we'll call our completion with a failure and say no rep. Okay, and then we'll return. So if we do have a task representation, let me clear these things out so a little bit cleaner here. So if we do have a task representation, then we can go ahead and we can say request.http body is equal to try JSON encoder dot encode with our representation. Okay, if for some reason it can't do that, let's go ahead and print out error encoding task, interpolating our task and interpolating our error here. Call our completion with the failure, no encode, and then we'll return. Okay, is everyone with me thus far? So we're getting to the point where we're creating a URL request with the task representation as our HTTP body. But we need to check and make sure, hey, can we actually, well, first off, does this task have a unique identifier? Okay, and if it does, then that's where we want, that's going to be part of our request URL, is using that identifier, okay? And then we're saying appending path extension JSON, which just sets the value of the HTTP body to use the content type to be JSON. So kind of a bit of more of a shortcut instead of having to set that manually. And then we're grabbing our representation and we're encoding it with a JSON encoder. Okay. So now that we've got our URL requests prepared, we're going to call URL session .shared.data task, passing in our URL requests and using our completion handler. Okay, so let's pass in our request here. And in our completion handler, let's handle our data and our error. Okay, and we always want to handle our error first. So we'll say if let error equals error. Let's go ahead and print error putting task to server. We'll interpolate the error here. Okay, and then I'm going to call dispatch queue .main.async, and we'll call our completion .failure other error. Okay, so you can do the dispatch queue either on this side or the other side, right? On either the person that calls this, or you can do it here. So because we're doing it here, we don't necessarily need to do it elsewhere. Okay, and then we'll say return. Okay, so if we had no error, we're going to assume, because this is a put request, I'm probably not going to get any data back. So I'm just going to call it completion with success true. And then, as we need to do with all of our data tasks, we're going to call .resume. Okay, and then once you've got that, let's have you raise your hand.
Mine wants me to unwrap my optional type URL for my base URL, but I typed exactly what you typed. Oh, I forgot that.
Okay. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead then. And do we have any questions about what this method is doing, what the purpose of this is, or how any of this is working?
Can you go over it a little bit, Johnny, briefly? Like what the whole method is doing? Like I know it's using it is pulling from the base URL, but kind of like what the structure is and why it's doing it.
Sure. So first step is the big picture behind this method is sending our task to Firebase, right? So that we have it on our database, on our Firebase database. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to sort of create a new task entry on our database based on the identifier of the task object, okay? Well, it's not very likely, like no task should be able to be created with an identifier, but we do need to check and we need to make sure, hey, let's make sure that our task object has an identifier. So we're saying guardlet UUID equal task.identifier, otherwise return, because we're gonna use that identifier in order to create a new entry on our database, okay? So if we have a UUID, then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna generate our request URL, okay? And this is, I think, specific to, because the Firebase database is just like a really simple database. If you like read in the documentation, the way that you write to these Firebase databases is you have an appending path component, which is gonna be like a unique identifier for your entry. Okay, so we have our appending path component, UUID.UUID string, and then the appending path extension is JSON. Okay, so all in all, that's going to be something like this. So if I have this URL here, okay. So appending path component is just simply like a forward slash. Okay, so it's going to be unique identifier here. Okay, unique identifier here, okay, and then we'll do .json, right? So that's the URL that we're trying to build, which is just going to create a new entry in this JSON body of my database, keyed by that unique identifier, okay? So if we have, so that's our request URL for this given task, so that we can write this specific task to this specific URL using the task's identifier. So we create our request, we set the HTTP method to put, okay, because we're putting to our database. And then what we need to do is remember that a task object itself cannot be encoded, right? And so we have to use a task representation. So this method is taking in a task, so we need to check if it has a task representation object. So we're saying guardlet representation equal task representation. Otherwise, completion with a failure, no representation, okay? Assuming that we do have a task representation, well, that task representation conforms to our codable protocol. So we're going to encode our representation and set it as the HTTP body on my request, okay? So if none of that works, then we're going to catch it here. We're going to print error encoding task and call our completion with a no encode error. Okay, so if I have that, my URL request is ready, right? I've set the body with my task representation. I've created the URL that I want to use, that I want to create this entry from. So I'm going to create a data task with that request. We're going to handle any errors that we get back, okay? Otherwise, so if I didn't have any errors, then we're going to assume that it was successful, and I'm going to just call it completion success. Okay, does that make sense, Sammy?
Yes, it does.
Cool.
Thank you, Johnny.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah. Whenever you're calling the completion success on the main queue, what is that doing for the program?
So for the program, what that would do is if I were like updating my UI accordingly, like if I wanted to call self.tableview.reload data, I would already be on the main queue, assuming it was successful. So that would reload without me needing to call dispatch queue on the caller.
Okay, so that is,
You don't have to do that here.
It's kind of arbitrary, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, that's what was confusing me.
Yeah, you can call it here, you can call it somewhere else, and that's sort of the uniqueness behind like because different instructors have like written these different projects, and so you'll sort of see like the code style of different developers as we do this. So like this was written by Andrew Madsen, so this is kind of his code style, the way that he does things, but it doesn't mean that this is like the one way to do it, right? So
Is this how Johnny would do things? Or would it be a little bit different?
I'd probably call dispatch queue on the caller side.
Right, like the actual table view.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more how I prefer it. I feel like it feels more natural there, because the whole reason that you want to do it on the main queue is so that you can update your UI. So it just seems to make more sense there, but teach their own, I suppose.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and let's go to all of the places where we're going to want to call this, okay? Wherever we're going to want to send our task. So there are going to be a few places. Let's hop over to our create task view controller, right? Because where we create tasks is probably where we want to also send that task. So we're going to go to our create task view controller, and let's go to our save method here. Okay, and then right after we generate and create our task here, let's go ahead and call task controller. Oh, let's see, do I not have? I thought I had one up here. Okay, let's go ahead and let's create a task controller in here. Task controller. So that when we call save, I'm going to call task controller dot send task to server. Okay. And pass in our task here, which I also haven't given a name to. So let's go ahead and say let task equal task, and then we'll pass in that task as we send it to the server. Okay, but task controller in this case is going to be nil, right? Because it's optional. I haven't passed in the value of task controller. Well, remember, we only want to have one task controller at a time. So instead of creating like a brand new task controller, I'm going to use dependency injection so that when we get to this create task controller, it's going to be using the same task controller that is being used on my table view, okay? So on our task table view controller, in my prepare for segue, let's go ahead and update our prepare for segue so that we can pass our task controller through, okay? So in my prepare for segue here,
Do we need to create an instance of task controller first?
yes, we will also need one here. Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that right here. Okay, so our task table view controller is where we're going to create our singular instance of our task controller. So let's do private let task controller equal task controller. Okay, and I want to use this on my create view controller. So inside of our prepare for segue here, let's pass that through. Okay, so if, well, let's do an else if down here, okay. Okay, otherwise, else if segue dot identifier is equal to, and then let's check what that segue is for our create task. Right here. It doesn't have one. Let's go ahead and set it. Okay, so let's just call this create task modal segue. Create task modal segue, or whatever you guys want to call it. Okay, so if the identifier is equal to our create task modal segue, if let nav's controller, because remember the segue goes to a nav controller, so if let nav controller equals segue.destination as UI navigation controller, let create task VC equal nav controller dot view controllers dot first as our create task view controller. Spacing got off here. Okay, so if after all of checking all these conditions, if we do have our create task view controller, then I can call create task VC dot task controller is equal to self dot task controller. And let's see. Spacing got off somewhere. What am I missing here?
What's with the dot first again?
So this view controller's property on the nav controller is just an array of view controllers. So it's an array of all of the view controllers in the navigation stack. So dot first is going to access the first controller in that navigation stack. And then I'm trying to see where.
I think you're just missing a curly brace.
Yep, there we go. Thank you. Okay. Any questions about this? Prepare for segue. Okay, so this is an example of the term dependency injection because our create task view controller has a dependency on having a task controller, right? And so we're going to insert that from our table view. We're going to give it a task controller. Okay, so that's the first place where we need to send a task up to our up to the database, right, is when we create one. But we also have the ability to edit a task. So we also want to push any changes up for editing a task. So let's go to our task detail view controller. And then this view will disappear. Okay, after we set our task.priority, let's go ahead and just like we had over another one, we're going to have a dependency on a task controller. Okay, type task controller. Okay, and right before we call save, let's go ahead and call task controller dot send task to server task. Okay, so we've covered creating a task, updating a task, okay? But there's also one more place that we can update a task, and that's actually on the table view cell itself, right? Is we can actually tap to mark a task complete. So we should also inform the database that the task has been updated as soon as we check that little box that the task has been complete, okay? So let's go ahead and let's hop over to our task table view cell. Okay. Our task table view cell here, and I'm going to create a new protocol. Okay, protocol. And let's go ahead and just call this task table view cell delegate. Okay. And I'm going to make this class protocol. And for requirements here, we're just going to have a single function called called did update task. Did update task with a task object. Okay, so let's add our property. We'll say weak var delegate of type task table view cell delegate. Okay, and similarly here, right before we call save, I'm going to call delegate dot update did update task and pass in my task here. Okay, so the task table view cell itself is not going to have access to its own task controller. Here. So delegate did update task. You guys still hear me okay?
You cut out on that last bit on mine.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay. So that our table view cell doesn't need to worry about having its own task controller, we're just going to have it call through a delegate in order to call task controller dot send task to server. Okay. So we created our protocol here. We added our weak var delegate here. And then right before we call save, when we toggle our little button, we're going to call delegate did update task with task.
Are we actually going to define what that function does, like on the table view or something?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, this is just the delegator side. We still need to do the delegate side.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been a while since we've done anything with delegates. Okay. We all good with the delegator stuff? Okay, so define the protocol, create the delegate property, and then call the method on the delegate. Okay. So now let's hop over to our task table view controller, which is ultimately going to be our delegate. Okay, so I'm going to write an extension on tasks table view controller, and this is going to conform to task table view cell delegate. Okay, so it's going to say, hey, you don't conform, go ahead and conform here. So there's our did update task. So this is where we're going to define it. Okay, well, lucky for us, our task table view controller already has a task controller. So I can simply call task controller dot send task to server task. Okay, and then we're missing one more piece. Does anyone know what that last piece is?
You need to update the detail view controller with, or you need to give the segue its own task controller for the detail view controller.
So we aren't using any segues here, right? Because this is the task table view cell.
Are we
Oh,
reloading the data?
wait, I just meant in general.
Yeah, and we don't even need to pass a task controller through because our table view cell doesn't need its own task controller because the table view controller is already handling that. So what we need to do is we need to set ourselves as the, starts with a D.
Delegate.
Yeah, set ourselves as the delegate for the table view cell, right? Because we're adopting the protocol or adopting the delegate protocol and we're conforming to it, but we actually need to assign ourselves as the delegate. So normally if you're the delegate for a table view cell, you do that in cell for row at, because that's where you actually have access to your cell. Okay, and then we're going to say cell.delegate is equal to self. I know, it's been a while. It's been a while. It's all coming back to us now, right? Hopefully.
What I was talking about earlier was in the prepare for segue method, we need to give the detail view controller access to our task controller. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is true. Yes, yeah, I did kind of gloss over that, didn't I? So yeah, so in our task detail, which is where we're updating, okay, we're going to say detail view controller dot task controller is equal to self dot task controller. Yeah, because we do have that dependency as well on our detail side. Okay, so if I run this, let me pull up the database here. Where did oh, here it is. Okay, so at this point, if we hit our create button, send task to server, complete, critical, I hope this works. Hit save here, okay. And now we have our new entries, okay. So somebody just said, well, hello there, right, with notes, oh yeah. Okay, here's my example, send task to server. I hope this works. Okay, so I'm hoping not only one of yours works. Is anybody else's working? Because I only saw that one other person's entry came up here.
I've got an error in my create task view controller saying use of unresolved identifier task just below where we, just below in the save function.
Okay, yeah, we'll take a look at it. Is anybody else having issues? Okay, somebody just came in. Easy peasy. Okay, did only 3 people's work?
Yeah, mine's kind of scattered, Johnny, so I'm just kind of falling behind a little bit, but I'm catching up.
Okay. Okay, well, before we take a quick break, let's test some of our other functionality because I did say that there are a few different places where we can sort of where we're going to send up the server, right? So one is creating a new task. Another is updating a task. So if I go to my task here, and if you're not seeing anybody else's, that's expected, right? So right now you can only update your own. So I'm gonna open this up and I'm gonna mark this as incomplete, not incomplete, incomplete, and go back to tasks, okay? And we see that it updated my entry here so that it is so complete is now equal to false, okay? So that one's working. Updating it in our detail and then going back is going to send that task to the server, okay? So the one other place that we configured it to send the task to the server is if I mark it complete here on the actual cell, right? So if I mark complete here, we see that it's toggling this complete for my entry here on and off, right? Okay. It's crazy how fast that is, isn't it? It's like, there's like 0 delay between that.
Can you set up Firebase for like a public facing app? Or is this more or less just for like personal use?
Yeah, you can use Firebase for public facing app. For sure.
Is that like random assortment of numbers and letters? Is that the UUID?
Mm-hmm. Yep, those are our identifiers that we're creating entries
okay.
using that UUID. So you can see they match here, right? The identifier for my entry matches this unique identifier here.
Sweet.
Okay, so if yours is working in all 3 places, I know you don't have access to the database, but hopefully if you push a button, you can see an update here. But if yours is working in all 3 places where we set up that send task to server method, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and take 5, and I can help whoever's having issues getting theirs to work. Okay, and then next we're going to talk about how to fetch, so that now we're all putting our tasks up, how do we get them down onto our local device? That's what we're going to cover next. So let's go ahead and take 5 though. Okay, Rob, is yours still having issues?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, so all you need to do is, it doesn't know what task is because you're creating a task on line 42, but you're not assigning it to anything, which is fine. When we did it, it was fine. We have that initializer that uses the discardable result. But in this case, you just want to say let task equal task, and then you're going to pass in that task. So yeah, just on the line above it, just put let task equal right before that, and that's all you need. So no, sorry. So on line 42, put that exact same thing right before you initialize your task. So let task.
So right there.
Nope, next line.
So right here, instead of this.
Not instead, you're just going to assign that initializer to.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. Let task equal task. Yeah.
And that, gotcha.
And then now it has a task to use.
Okay.
Cool.
You were going just a little fast.
Yeah, sorry, lots to cover.
No, you're good. I was keeping up, but just barely.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead and test that out and see if everything works. Okay.
Would you mind if I take a quick look at task representation?
Yeah, let's see here. Task presentation here.
And can I see task plus convenience?
Uh-huh. Do you want to see the initializer or the task representation?
The task representation.
Okay, it's right there.
Thanks.
So Johnny, this by itself isn't necessarily a good way to save data like per user. This is more or less like kind of a group database. And in order to separate it per user, they'd have to have like an account or
Yeah.
like some kind of unique identifier.
Yeah, so right now this is just set up as kind of one singular thing where we're all kind of sharing. But yeah, you'd want to have like separate containers for different users.
Gotcha.
All right, it should be good now.
Cool. Great. Okay, anybody want to see anything else?
Yeah, I'm getting an error that says it's unable to find method tasks table view controller. Create task modal segue.
Let's see. Do you want to share your screen really quick while people start coming back? Okay, where's the error at?
It's down here. It's anytime I press the plus.
Okay, is it crashing or is anything bad happening or?
When I created a task, I didn't see it update on your end when you had the list up. So I don't know if it's
Okay.
updated.
If you can go jump to your prepare for segue for me. Okay, so you've got your two task detail. Let's see, create one more. Can you create another task for me real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that didn't come up to me. Okay, let's take a look. If you go over to your, go to your create task modal segue, or yeah, go to your create task view controller. Okay, send task to server task. That's good. Okay, and then hop over to your model controller, your task controller, and let me see your Send task to server, good. Okay. Okay, scroll down for me. And put like a breakpoint on line 53. And then try to create another task. Okay, so I didn't even get to this point. So go ahead and remove that breakpoint on line 53. And scroll up for me. And put a breakpoint on, yeah, let's just put one on line 30. Let's just step through it real quick. So let's create another task. Well, it's not even calling this at all. Okay, go back to your create task view controller. And put a breakpoint on line 31. Okay, and PO task controller.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so there is an issue in your prepare for segue. Did you set the identifier in the storyboard, the segue identifier?
For the create task.
Yes, but you don't want to do that one because that's not actually a segue. That's a bed segue. That should go in the segue between your table view and your nav controller, right there.
Okay. Yeah, I think I put them wrong. Just right here.
Yeah. Yep. That should be your fix.
Okay. Yeah, that should work. Thanks.
Yep. All right. Let's see. Just checking. Okay. Sammy, do you still need help getting yours working? Where are you at?
I just downloaded what you brought up, Johnny. It's because I felt way behind, so it's better that I just downloaded what you had so far.
Okay. Cool.
But it works.
Let me know if you have questions. But yeah, my apologies for going. I didn't realize I went through that really fast. It's always a struggle trying to get everything in.
No, it's all good. It's just slow typer. Trying to speed it up a little bit on my end.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, let me know. Let me know in the moment if I need to slow down. I can definitely do that. So
Thank you.
But yeah, I did put the project on Slack of where we are up to this point. So if yours is like broken or you have any issues, you can just download that and use that as we move forward. Okay. All right. So we're able to now put tasks onto the database, but now we actually want to be able to get them down when we launch the app, and then also when we like swipe down to refresh. So let's go back to our task controller here. Okay. Let me clear up the interface a little bit. And we're going to set up a few different methods that are going to help us to update our tasks. Okay.
Can you share your screen?
Are you gonna?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm
Share your
not
screen, maybe.
struggling with the sharing lately. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and we're going to create another function. Okay. That is going to be used to update our tasks in core data with the representations that we get back from the database. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's do this just after our send task to server. I'll just call this update tasks with representations. So I'm going to create a new function. Okay, and this is going to be a private function because really it's just a helper function that's going to be inside of my fetch. Because we're just going to fetch and we're going to update on the task controller itself. We're not going to do that like midway in between, okay? So that's why it's a private function, because it's only available inside of the task controller itself. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to update our tasks with the representations that we get back from the database, okay? So this is going to be with an array of task representation objects. Okay, and we're also going to say that this throws an error. Okay. Try not to get too bogged down with what we're going to do in here. But what we need to do is we need to identify which tasks have changes. Okay, and then we want to be able to update those. Okay, or which tasks we already have and be able to update those. So let's go ahead and we're going to say let identifiers to fetch equal representations dot compact map. Okay, and the transformation that we're going to make here is going to be UUID with UUID string using $0 dot identifier. Okay, so I'm going to create an array of a bunch of UUIDs from my task representations. Okay, remember task representations have identifiers, but they're strings. So I need to turn all of those strings into UUIDs. So that's what the compact map is doing, is it's going through each one of those representations, grabbing its task, and then grabbing its task identifier and turning that into a UUID. So now I've got an array of a bunch of UUIDs from my task representations, okay? And that's going to be my identifiers to fetch. Any questions about that?
Is that filtering out the ones that we already have or the ones that we don't have?
So right now, it's not doing any filtering right now. It's grabbing all of the representations that we pass in at this point.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So next, we're going to create a property called representations by ID. Okay. So I'm going to create a new dictionary here. Unique keys with values. Okay. So I'm creating a dictionary, and I actually want each of my tasks to be keyed by the tasks identifier. Okay. So if you look at it inside of Firebase, all right, we actually see that all of these, the identifier is a property, but they're also keyed by the identifier. Okay. So I'm doing something similar here, where I'm creating a dictionary, unique keys with values, okay? And then I'm going to call this zip method, okay? And we're going to zip up identifiers to fetch with their representations. Okay. So given two arrays, take the arrays and then pretend that they're like vertical like a zipper, right? So I've got zipper side A and zipper side B. When you zip them up, right, when you zip something up, it like brings those prongs together. Okay, so what we're doing here is I've got an array that has a bunch of identifiers. I've got an array that has a bunch of tasks. And presumably the identifiers and the tasks themselves, the task representations themselves, are in the exact same order, right? Because the identifiers came from the representations array. So presumably, if I zip those up, the identifiers is going to be the key for the representation object, right? So we're zipping those up into a dictionary. Does that make sense? Sort of, hopefully. It's just new, right? It's just new stuff. So we've got my identifiers, we've got my representations. I want to zip those up into a new dictionary, right? So each task representation is going to be keyed by the task representations identifier. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to say var tasks to create equals representations by ID. Okay, so we're going to create a fetch request here, var fetch request. And I want to fetch my task object. So we're going to say is equal to task.fetch request. Okay. Next, I'm going to write a predicate. Okay. A predicate is going to sort of hone in or filter a specific type of task. Okay. So it's sort of putting in like a search keyword. I don't want all the tasks. I want all of the tasks that have this, that has this predicate. Okay. So I'm going to say fetch request dot predicate is equal to ns predicate with format. Okay. And this just takes in a string here. Okay. So we're going to do identifier in $$ at. Okay, and the $@ is a placeholder for your arguments that you have here. Okay, so this $@ is going to be a placeholder for my identifiers to fetch.
Johnny, you mean %sign?
Yep, sorry, not $%. Okay, so predicate with format identifier, which is the name of the property on my task object, in my identifiers to fetch. Okay, so I've got my array of identifiers to fetch based on my representations, and I want to go down into core data and fetch all of the tasks that I have that I already have with those identifiers. Okay. So it's going down and we're grabbing all of our tasks where the tasks identifier is inside of that identifiers to fetch array.
Do we need to import something on here? Because I'm getting an error saying use of identifier type NS fetch request.
Core data. You want to import core data? Okay. So let's go ahead and we're going to get our context here. So core data stack dot shared dot main context. Okay. So let's say let existing tasks equal try context dot fetch, and we're going to pass in our fetch request. Okay. And then let's go ahead and loop through each of those. So for task in my existing tasks, guard let ID equal task dot identifier, let representation equal, and then we want to grab representations by ID keyed by the ID. Otherwise, we'll continue, which just means go into the next iteration of the loop. Okay. So if we get in here, we know that we have an existing task. And so instead of creating a new task, we want to update the task, update task. Okay. So this is for already existing tasks. Okay, and we'll come back to this in a sec. Okay, so for new tasks, right? For new tasks, let's go ahead and loop through our representations. So for representations in tasks to create dot values, we're going to generate a new task object with our task representation initializer. Okay, and we're going to pass in for representation, pass in our representation and our context here. Okay, then we've got our catch block. So let's print out error fetching tasks for UUIDs. And we'll interpolate our error. Okay, so once those tasks have been created or updated, then let's go ahead and call self.try, or yeah, try self.save to persistent store. Okay, so big picture of this method. If we already have the task objects saved on our phone, then we don't want to create new ones, right? We want to update the ones that we already have, okay? If we don't have them, then we want to create them on our local device. So the whole point of this method is saying, hey, here's a set of task representations and all of their identifiers, okay? I'm gonna go and I'm gonna fetch my tasks from core data and I'm gonna say, hey, give me all of the tasks in core data that match these identifiers, right? And so anything that is matching, right? Anything that has like a one-to-one match of this identifier versus this identifier, those already exist on my phone. So I need to update them. I don't need to create them, okay? For any identifiers that do not exist inside of core data, I need to create a new task object from that task representation. Okay, so that's what this method is doing, is it's giving us all of the task identifiers, checking if we already have them. If we do already have them, we're gonna update, or we're going to create if we don't have them yet. Okay, but we need one more method, right? I said we have to update task here. So let's just create private func update task of type task with representation, task representation. Okay, and we're gonna update, we're never gonna update the ID. So really the only thing that we can update is the name equals representation dot name, task dot notes equals representation dot notes, task dot priority is equal to representation dot priority, and task dot complete is equal to representation dot complete. Okay. So with that then, where I left this comment to update our task, let's go ahead and call self.update. Okay, and we're going to update our task with our representation. And I'm going to remove that from tasks to create dot remove value. Okay. Okay, because I already have it, I want to remove it from my tasks to create so that it doesn't get created here. Okay, any questions about our method? It's kind of a long one.
Can you just go through it really quick one more time from top to bottom, what it's doing?
Sure. Okay, so we're wanting to, so I guess the purpose of this method is to update or create tasks with representations. Okay, because remember, if you're thinking about this, is that maybe that like we can either create a task, maybe we have like a web client that we can create tasks and we want those to also be created like on our phone, or if we've got like a phone and an iPad, whenever we open this up, we want the data to be synced and to be the same between all of our devices, right? So this method is going to be called to update or create tasks with the representations that we get back from the database, okay? So first off, we are going to get all of the identifiers that we need to fetch, okay? Which is literally just all of the identifiers for the representations we have on Firebase, okay? Then what we do is we're going to be creating a dictionary, okay, using the identifiers as the key and the representations as the values, okay? So pretty similar structure again to here, right? The key, and then the value itself is this entire object, okay? So we generate a fetch request with this predicate, okay, and this identifier in is for identifiers in, identifiers to fetch, okay? And then we need our context, okay? And then we have to do all this in a do try catch block because these are all methods that throw an error. So we're going to say let existing tasks equal try context.fetch using our fetch request, okay? So we're gathering our tasks from core data. We're fetching them out, okay? And then I'm going to go through each one and I'm going to say, okay, these are all of the tasks that I already have on my phone, okay? So we're going to say, we're going to check to see if it has an identifier, and then we're also going to grab its representation keyed by its ID, okay? And then I'm going to call self.update, right? Because these, and it might be that that there are no changes, right? We're not saying only update if there are changes. We're just saying we're calling update every single time, right? So it's going to go and it's going to set task name to representation name, notes, priority, complete. Those may be the exact same, but we're just to make sure that we have like all of our ducks in a row and that our data is going to be consistent and reliable, we're going to update those every time, even if they aren't different, okay? So we're using this for loop going through each of our existing tasks that we already have, and we're going to update the task with its representation, okay? And then we've got our tasks to create, which remember, tasks to create is an array of everything that we got back from the database, right? Well, I don't want to create a task if it already exists, right? So if I got into this loop here, then it means it already exists, and so I don't want to create it, and so I'm going to remove it from my tasks to create. Dictionary, yeah, my tasks to create dictionary, okay? So once I get out of this for loop, then it means that everything that's left inside of that array are tasks that I don't have saved on my phone or my device. So I'm going to loop through each one of those tasks to create, and I'm going to create a new task object from them. Okay. We good? Questions about that? Does that make more sense, hopefully? Okay. So let's do this. Okay. So let's go ahead then, and remember this is a private function, right? So it's only going to be called internally here. So let's create a new function here to fetch tasks from Firebase. Okay. And before I forget, let's just go ahead, let's go ahead and create this method. Okay. Func fetch tasks from server. Okay. We're going to have a completion to let us know when it's done at escaping. Okay, completion handler. Let's give it a default value _in. That's going to be the body. All right. So let's get our request URL. So let request URL equal base URL dot appending path extension JSON. Okay, so get all of the JSON from this database. URL session dot shared dot data task with our, let's just do with our URL, because this is going to be a get method. Okay, so we can just do request URL here, and then we're going to handle our data and our error, and then make sure you call resume at the end of your data task. Okay, and let's handle our error first. So if let error equals error, let's go ahead and print out error fetching tasks. Interpolate our error here. And again, just a code styling thing, but I'll just do it here. Dispatch queue dot main dot async, and we'll call completion dot failure with dot other error, and then return. Okay, so if we have an error, let's go ahead and call our completion with the failure. Okay, guard let data equal data. Otherwise, let's print out no data returned by data task. Scroll up a little bit. Data equal data. Okay, dispatch queue main async completion dot failure with no data. Return. Okay, so if we have data, then what we need to do is we need to decode it from the JSON, right? So that's going to be done in a do try catch block. Okay, so here in do, let's go ahead and we're going to create a task representations array. So let task representations equal array. And we're going to do try JSON decoder dot decode. Okay, and we're decoding it as a string task representation, right? Because that's what the data is coming back as from the JSON. Because we've got that identifier, and then we've got the task representation. So I'm going to do dot self here from data. Okay. So this is going to return a dictionary, which I want this to be an array. So I'm actually going to do dot values here, which just gives me all of the values inside of that dictionary. Okay. So once we've fetched them, then that's where we either want to update them or create them. So we're going to call try self.update tasks with our task representations. call dispatch queue, dispatch queue.main.async, completion, success, true. In the catch block, we'll print out error decoding task representations. Error. And similarly, dispatch queue.main.async, call our completion with failure, no decode.
Can you scroll down just a little bit, Johnny?
I'm done. So yes, I can slow down.
No, can you scroll down?
Oh, scroll down. I thought you said slow down. I was like, well,
Well, I was going to say that earlier, but I
Wow.
barely keeping up. So
let me stop here. Okay, do we have any questions about our fetch method here? Okay, well, let's go ahead and call this. So we want to call it when we initialize the task controller. So in the initializer for our task controller, let's go ahead and call fetch tasks from server. Okay, so as soon as we load up the app, but then another really common way to update tasks is being able to like swipe down and you get that little activity indicator thing that it's like syncing. So we're gonna add that next, okay? And so we're gonna fetch initially when we launch, and then also when we do like a swipe down to fetch any updates. Okay, so let's go to our task table view, or sorry, our main.storyboard. Okay, and on my table view here, we're gonna add, let's see here. We're gonna click on our table view and go to the attributes inspector. And where is it? I haven't done this in so long. There should be an option to add a refresh control. Am I blind? I can't see it. Do not dismiss, blah, 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 paging enable, indicator, where? Oh, okay, sorry, it's on the table view controller itself. So click on the controller, refreshing. There's a refreshing attribute here. Change that to enabled. Okay, so you can see that that adds this refresh control object here. Okay, and so I'm going to open up my task table view controller in the assistant editor. Okay, And we can do this. Let's just do this after view will appear. I'm going to control drag from my refresh control. Okay. And we'll just say refresh data. And hit connect. Okay. So that automatically, what that does is it adds in that gesture recognizer of like swiping down on the table view to refresh. That's going to hit this ID action here. Okay, so inside of refresh data, we're going to go ahead and call task controller dot fetch tasks from server, and we're going to use the one that has the completion. Okay, let's just replace that with an underscore because we don't need to do anything. And as soon as we have the tasks, we need to end the refreshing on our refresh control manually. Okay, so we're going to say, okay, as soon as you have everything self dot refresh control dot end refreshing, meaning like don't show that little spinny indicator anymore, right? Because the table view itself doesn't necessarily know when it's done, so we have to sort of manually say, okay, you're all done, you don't need to spin anymore, we've got the new data.
I'm sorry, where do they derive from again? I was too busy looking for the enablement part.
This refresh control on your table view. So if you enabled the refreshing, you should see a refresh control here. And then you control drag from that to create your ID action. Okay, did you get that, David?
Yeah, I got that part. I'm still making the connection.
Okay. Okay, for the sake of time, we have one more method, but I'm gonna send it to you and talk about it. Instead of typing it, we'll just talk about it.
Could you scroll to that IB action real quick?
Yep. Okay, any questions about the refresh control? Okay, cool. So I went to Slack, I sent you the code for the last method that we would have done had we more time to type it all out, but instead we'll just have to, I'll just have to paste it in. So let's go ahead, you can put this wherever, you can put it in between send or fetch or after everything, I don't really care. Okay, we've got this method called delete task from server, okay? So this is going to allow us that when we do a swipe to delete, we want to also delete it on the server, right? We want to keep those things up to date. So what we do is similarly to above, so delete task from server, it takes in a task. Okay, we're going to say guardlet UUID equal task identifier because we want to make sure that the task has an identifier. Okay, then we're going to use our request URL and we're going to sort of go to the URL for that entry, right, for that task. Okay, so we create our request, but our HTTP method, this is a new type of method we haven't used yet, is delete. Okay, so instead of a put method, it's a delete method, but at that same URL for that task. Okay, so then we're going to call our data task on our URL session. We'll print out our response and then just say completion success. Okay, and then resume.
Why is there a bang operator on the response?
Because we're expecting that the response will not be nil.
Okay.
Certainly not the best way to handle that, but
What would be the other way? Out of curiosity.
just you just do like an if let response equals response, just like safely unwrap it.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Yep, because response is optional. So, all right. So let's run this. And assuming all goes well, you should see a bunch of tasks come in. Everyone's dabbing on Clayton.
It's the haters.
All the haters. All the haters want to be you. Okay. So I've got all my tasks here. Should be in sync. Let's see. Can I have someone add a task and then just let me know when you're done? Or I guess I'll see it come up. So just go ahead. Someone create a task, or everyone create a task, whatever. Who's gonna get there first? There's a task. Okay, so presumably, I didn't even see what the task was called. Was it this one? I don't remember which one it was. Sorry, someone create another one?
Yeah, that was the one that was created because that was mine.
Oh, this one?
The one that said hello there below it.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, so presumably, if I swipe down, you'll see that we get that little sync indicator up top. That's our refresh control. Okay, so if I swipe down, and then we see right here, we've got that hello there task that just came in. Okay.
I must have missed something because I don't have those.
You guys aren't seeing them?
Yeah, I'm
I'm
not
not.
either.
Mine just crashed.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either.
Sheesh, guys. My bad. I don't know. That's weird. We'll take a look at it. Okay. So then the last thing that we wanted to test was I can swipe, hit delete here, and come on.
I don't think we called delete from server anywhere.
Yep, we didn't. I forgot that. Yep, let's go back to our delete method in our table view row here. Okay, and after we delete the task, let's go ahead and call task controller delete task from server task. Thank you, Clayton. Should have you teach tonight. I've been catching all sorts of things. Okay, so hello there, swipe, delete. See that it deletes the entry from the database. This is sweet, delete, deletes the entry from the database, etc., etc. Okay, so our deletion should be working. Now you guys are saying, well, okay, so for those of you that want to stay, I'll help you figure out why your refresh control isn't working. But that's everything that we have for tonight. I'll zip up the project, send it to you guys so that you have a completed working project. But I realized this was a ton of code, right? Being able to work in all of these things. But remember the key takeaways for today were being able to fetch, be able to put tasks to the server, and then also be able to delete, okay? So fetch and update, put, and delete were the things that we wanted to accomplish tonight. So if you're feeling good about all of those, your app is working, you're good, then you're welcome to go, and we'll see you on tomorrow. I think tomorrow we'll hold a Q&A for those that weren't here. So if you guys have questions that you want to talk about as you sort of let all this soak in, we'll talk about those tomorrow. But then we have class on Wednesday, and then that's your last lecture with me. So then you guys move on to build week, and then you'll move into unit 3, which is awesome. Okay, cool. So for those of you who are good, you're welcome to go, and then I'll stay after and help anyone or everyone apparently that is having issues. So, okay,
Yes,
So
please.
Clayton, your refresh control is not working. Is it crashing or just nothing is coming in?
It's not my well, that's part of it, but okay, so I'm not, when I'm opening the app, I'm not getting the tasks from the server. And then additionally, my refreshing doesn't really do anything. The animation goes and it spins, but then nothing happens.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's
Let me
have,
just share.
yeah, let's have you share. Let's take a look.
Do you want me to set a breakpoint or just run it and show you?
Well, let's take a look at our task controller really quick.
Okay.
And scroll all the way to the top. And let's put a breakpoint on line 28. And let's run it. Okay, cool. So we're at least fetching. So now let's hit the step in button. So not that one. No, that's all right. Yeah. Normally you want to do the step into so that it will take you into that function that it's about to call. But that's okay. Let's just go set a break. Well, actually, let's just rerun it.
Okay.
No, you're good. We don't break.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. Step into. Okay. So let's go ahead and step.
This one, right?
Yep. Okay. So we've got our yeah, that's right. Let's put a breakpoint on line 75. And then just hit the continue button. Are you calling .resume in your data task?
I'm not. I'm not.
Okay. Is that what everybody else is doing? Did everyone else forget that? Okay, let's try it again.
There we go. That's it.
Nice. Yep, so your refresh control should work now because if you were never calling resume, you were never actually fetching tasks. So the refresh control wasn't actually doing anything.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Everybody's looking now. Did everyone have that same problem?
I
Yeah.
had .resume on mine.
Yeah, mine's still not working either.
Okay. All right. Rob, you want to share your screen with me? Let's take a look.
Do you see my screen?
Yes. So let's set a breakpoint inside of line 34. And then just run it.
Come on.
Okay, so did you say yours wasn't fetching, Rob?
Correct.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and let's it's running, but it didn't hit your breakpoint. Put a breakpoint on line 32. Okay. Go to your tasks table view controller. And go to your task controller. Like your declaration of your task controller should be at the top under properties. That should be equal to a new instance of task controller.
So yeah.
Equals open closes, yeah, open closing parentheses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you were never actually creating a task controller. So task controller was nil throughout the app. Okay, so go ahead and run it now.
I don't think it's gonna.
Let's see. Yeah, go ahead and set the type. Well, just click on that for me. It's just meaning you're saying task controller is optional, but it's not because we're creating a new task controller, so you can get rid of all those question marks. Okay, then run it. Okay, you can turn off your breakpoints for now.
You want me to try to rerun it?
It just looks like we're having some issues decoding some stuff. Maybe try and delete the task that you have in there and then try to rerun it. No value. So did somebody ruin my database? No, my database looks okay. If anybody sends up anything weird or unexpected, it makes it so that nobody else in the class can decode it properly. That looks fine. That's fine. That looks fine. Let's go to, yeah, let's set a breakpoint on line 49. Okay, so we're getting a bunch of data. Yep. From, okay. Go ahead and hit the step over button. Okay, so that did not work. It did not, it was not able to decode. So go to your task representation file for me. Oops, priority completed. Okay, go to your task plus convenience. Scroll down for me a little bit. Oh, that looks fine. Why is it not decoding? Okay, go back to your, yeah, that looks right. That looks right to me. Go back to your task controller. JSON decoder.decode. Data. Isn't that what I have? Let me see if I'm seeing the error on my side.
Hey, Johnny doesn't have a space between string and task representation. So shouldn't be string space and then.
That shouldn't. That shouldn't.
That do anything? Oh, okay.
I'm confused though, because it does. I mean, your code looks exactly the same. Try JSON decoder, decoded string. I mean, you can try putting a space after this string.
Right here?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only difference I see in my code. I don't know why that would. Go ahead.
Just step over.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't think so. Okay, go ahead and step over again. Okay, and then step over again. What? Key coding key string value completed. Go back to your task representation for me. What?
Instead of completed, shouldn't it just be complete?
Well, it's still matched on the other stuff. It would self.
Somebody probably. Let's see. Yeah, it should be complete, not completed.
Because it has to match what's coming from the server, right?
Which everything.
Oh, yeah.
everything
Okay.
is complete.
So I just need to look at my other stuff and see where it was completed, where I had completed at.
Mhm.
It should be in your task plus convenience. Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah. And yeah. And then try building. There might be a few other places you have to fix that. Sheesh, Clayton.
Yeah, man, you're pro.
You're the
No,
deep.
I'm not. You can call me a Hawkeye, but I can't fix it. My own stuff to save my life.
There we go. I'll try to.
Okay.
I just hit play on all of it. There we go.
Nice.
Super. Yay. Thank you.
Sweet. All right.
That was a huge help.
Okay. What else we got? Does anybody else have anything?
I'm getting an error. I think when it tries to pull data, it says it's like the data given was not valid JSON.
Okay. Let's take a look. All right. The given data was not valid JSON, underlying error, blah, blah, blah. Something wasn't right. Okay. Okay. Did you write the dab on Clayton? Was that you?
I don't know how that got there. That's weird.
I don't know how that got there.
my fetch function isn't working, but I don't know how that got there. Okay. Yeah, let's hop over to your task controller.
Okay.
And let's set a breakpoint on, we'll scroll up for me a little bit. Okay, your pending path extension should be lowercase JSON, not uppercase. So on line 32, where you have your pending path extension, lowercase JSON.
Oh. That?
Without a dab on you, Bronson. Come on.
Yeah, try running it now.
Ah, there we go.
Nice.
Okay, that was easy.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right, anything else? All right, cool. You're over time, and it's late on the East Coast. Christopher DeVito wants to go to bed, so it's time.